Hey everybody, welcome to episode 5 of the Energy Tech Podcast. I think you're really going to enjoy the conversation with our guest today. Hey everybody, we're super happy to have a good friend of mine visit us here today. Jim Cendoma came by the shop. We did a little shop tour walk around. Now we're in my office that I also call the my personal motorsports museum and Hall of Fame. But Jim, thanks for coming.
I've been looking forward to seeing your new digs and getting a tour around and seeing your projects, which I didn't see before.
Yeah.
So, an interesting thing on the way here, I was thinking about this get together, and I thought about the first time we met. You remember that? It was at an oil and gas.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which one was? Yeah, but yes.
And I'm the new guy. I don't know anybody, and there's a buffet there. So I load up my plate, and the first thing I'm doing, I'm just kind of looking around, observing, and there's you at a table, just you. And I smiled, and you gave me a welcoming smile back, and I thought, okay, I'll go over there. And I sat down and I took one look at you and I said, as one weightlifter to another, you can always tell, who spent some time,
Yeah, that's cool.
In the gym. And there were a couple of things that happened that day. And I know you're going to remember this one. And I don't remember the lady's name that came over, but she came over and was chatting with us. And then some goofball, I know, you're shaking your head, right? Came over and he's throwing business cards all around, and he had his name on his hat, and he has his name plastered across his sweatshirt, and he's just being obnoxious.
Yep.
And you and I looked at each other, and we didn't say much, but the lady said, "What a jerk."
Yeah.
You remember that?
I totally remember that. There are those guys at these networking events that they put themselves immediately into the rep zone.
Right.
And they have this attitude, well, it's my job to sell stuff, so that means it's everyone else's job to buy stuff. And so, yeah, there's been a lot of those events where some guy, he'll give me a 5-minute pitch about something that is completely irrelevant to me. And I guess that's just what they do. But
yeah.
So, Jim, tell you and I, we've talked many times, but yeah, share your background, how how you came up, and your education and your experience to get to the point entrepreneurship and where you are today.
Well, it's obvious my hair's a little grayer than yours, so I've been around a while.
Yeah.
Fortunately, though, when I was young, I had more than a few entrepreneurs who took me under their wing, and for some reason they liked me and they showed me the ropes. And I grew up on the glass manufacturing floor.
And you know what? I think that is because I look back now, I've been in this general line of work for about 30 years. And there are people who were never assigned to be mentors to me, but they were. And I realized what it is that I showed curiosity. So everyone that gets these unofficial mentors, it's because you show curiosity.
Yep, curiosity and respect.
Yep.
Because, it's like, well, this, first of all, I'm young. I hit the glass manufacturing floor, and I don't know anything. I don't even know where the men's room is. I'm still trying to find my way around. And, I just had this natural respect for these guys that weren't necessarily formally educated, but they were wicked freaking smart. They knew how gears came together. They knew how systems work. And, they were willing to share that with me. Flip side, if you were a jerk, your life was tough.
Yeah.
Because they weren't going to show you anything. They would just let you wallow in your own ignorance.
Yep, I can imagine.
So, and then what happened is they became friends. And an interesting thing happened while we're on the subject. One of my mentors who passed away a little while ago, his son contacted me. And I hadn't seen his son since, I held him when he was a baby. And he says, hey, I was chatting with my mom, and my mom says, you have some stories about my dad. You want to get together over a drink or so, and I just want to hear some stories about my dad. And I thought, wow, this is so cool. So it was great. I got to share some stories. And so he says to me, he says, hey, I've heard a lot of stories about my dad, but he contacted me through email. And he says, but you mentioned the word mentor, and you're the only one that's in these stories that, shared the term mentor with her dad. And a memory flashed through my mind. And I said to him, I got to tell you something. If it wasn't for your dad, I wouldn't be sitting in this chair, or at the very best, I'd be sitting in a wheelchair.
So what was your role at the glass plant?
So I was at equipment engineering.
Okay.
And on this particular thing, I had to...
So would that be designing the process line equipment that is used to...
and we were more of a troubleshooting, retrofitting group of guys.
Okay, like the aftermarket kind of stuff.
So our purpose was to keep the plant up and running.
You're in the plant, you're not designing new, you're taking what exists and making it a little bit better, a little bit more reliable, troubleshooting.
And one of the things that we did, we interfaced with the overall engineering group.
Yeah.
So if we got into a really large project that involved design of new equipment, then we reached out to the mixing and melting engineering guys, the production engineering guys, and we teamed up with them. But on a daily basis, our job was to retrofit the equipment, keep the plant up and running. So it was just a great place for a young man to start. It was a union shop, so you learned about how to interact with the whole union side of the manufacturing world. It was a great learning experience.
Yeah, that's great. So from there, then at some point you made the flip from on the user side to the vendor side. How far along into your career was that?
Well, the first thing that came about was I was sitting in my office, and there was another fellow engineer next to me, and a rep came in, and I'm trying to remember his name. Last name was Van Holst or something like that, and he came in and he's pitching equipment to me, and he leaves. And my counterpart says, man, what a tough way to go through life. And he says, he comes in, he's pitching, he's hoping you're buying something. And I said, and the gentleman's name was Peter. I said, Peter, I just wrote him a PO for about $100,000 worth of equipment. Mm-hmm. I said, I think he's doing really well.
Yeah. It's pretty good.
So that was the first thing that attracted me to that was, okay, I'm in here doing all this, and if I do a really, really great job, and at the end of the year, during my performance excellence review, if I get positive numbers, I get a 5% raise.
Yeah.
So, but if I'm on the selling side and I want to give myself a 5% raise, I just work a little harder. So that was my first hint of being on the outside as a vendor.
Yeah, it's funny because, what we do, and it's changed a lot. Like I said, I came into this business in the mid-90s, and technical sales at that time in the industrial world was more technical than now. I'll paint that with a broad brush, but there are those of us who are still called technical practitioners doing things the old way. This is totally a coincidence. This is not staged. I was looking something up the other day, but this book, Machine Design Fundamentals. Yes. So I had Machine Design 1 and 2 when I was in Mechanical Engineering Technologies School at West Virginia Tech. And the reason I bring that up is because every class, we had a weekly 3-hour lab. And every once in a while, our professor, Mr. Ward, would show us these videos from industry because he came from industry. He worked for one of the chemical plants in Charleston, West Virginia, Union Carbide, actually. And he was a process engineer. So he was a mechanical engineer, so very in tune with gearboxes and drives, et cetera, et cetera. So he had a lot of training kind of films. And the ones I remember were from Falk, So the gearbox,
Falk, yes.
which doesn't even exist anymore.
No.
They've been bought, I think, by Rexnord. But so for the couplings and gearboxes, we watched and so this was 30 years ago, watching videos that were probably 10 years old. So that would have been 1985. And you see this guy that's wearing a sport coat and a tie and going around to these factories and having these nice technical discussions and showing people stuff and helping them with solve problems, not like some hardcore pitch that, but just really, so that was appealing to me to not have to go to the same place every day.
Yes.
And I love machinery. That's what got me to do my favorite books when I was a kid, and I still have copies of the Big Book of Real Trucks, the Big Book of Real Trains, the Big Book of Real Construction Equipment. I would ask my mom to read me those pretty much every day. So when I was 3, 4, and I'm in my mid 50s now, and I have this enthusiasm for machinery. So it was just a neat way to do that. So, but that's, otherwise there's, young people are just not exposed to this line of work, I'd say.
And you used the word curiosity a little early on.
Yeah.
And I think and we have that in common. I want to see how things are made.
Yep.
One of my favorite shows, I think they call it today, it's how it's made.
Yep.
or something along those lines. When I was a kid, it was Industry on Parade.
Mm-hmm.
So every once in a while, if you're watching how it's made, they'll put in a little black and white of the Ford assembly plant. Back then I'm like, oh, I saw that when I was a kid. So to get out on the plant floor is where I really, really enjoy that. I do some of my best thinking, if you will, and the noise, the clanging, the banging, the observation of things coming together, things moving. I just feel right at home there, and it's an exciting place to be. And
coming back to the mentorship piece of it, so when I was young and I started to go to some steel mills and things like that by myself, well, I think the guys realized that I wasn't there pitching anything, and I was asking them a question just because I wanted to understand how this slab of steel came in one end and these rolls off the other. I said, "Oh, you got time?" I said, "Yeah, sure do." Okay, and they would give me these tours, and so I learned so much from a process level and the equipment, and at the same time the problems, and then that they're having that they don't even know that there's a fix for, and so that's making that connection between understanding at a high level, and then at a nuts and bolts level, and then how the stuff that we offer can help people, and they may not even be aware that there is a solution to this problem. A lot of times it's, well, that's just the way it is. So anyhow, it's fun. You touched on two really interesting dynamics there, because one, too close to the forest to see the trees. Yeah. So, I've certainly done this, when I was at the plant. I'm so focused on this process or on this piece of machinery. I'm looking at it, and, somebody else comes in and they have an overview, and they tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And you're like, "Well, yeah, let's do that." And the other thing too is, because you and I are inside so many different manufacturing plants, and I love it, cross-pollination. So I might see something in a paper mill, and I can apply it in a glass plant. And the funny thing about that is, sometimes I'll mention something. You have to be careful, because sometimes the person that you're trying to share your education with, they're like, paper mill? Yeah. Nobody works as hard as we're a steel mill. Well, you talk to guys in the paper mill, and they'll tell you nobody works harder than they do. Yeah. But, I love it when you pick up something in one industry and you can apply it in another industry. And that's the other, actually, there's a third thing. And I feel kind of bad, because as time goes on, it's harder and harder to get into plants, because people see us sometimes as time wasters or a pain in the butt or whatever.
and for very good reason, because there's a bunch of people out there that do waste other people's time.
Yep.
We don't. I know you don't. And I certainly strive not to. When I show up, I bring value. So it's a little bit harder to get your foot in the door.
There's one of the changes that we've seen is that, okay, the time wasters, a lot of times they're not even present at sites anymore. They're hiding behind a desk, and so the ones who, so it is definitely, there's been a not a thinning of the herd so much, but that they're not even necessarily on site anymore.
You bring up some really great points. Thinning of the herd. And what we do, and I'm going to sound a little braggadocious, but if you get out into what we do, and if you're not good at it, or you're not willing to learn new things,
you get exposed real quick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's almost self-correcting. It'll just boot you out. You won't be successful.
That's right. Yeah, because if you take a job working at a facility, you're going to come in at an entry level position, and it's understood there's milestones that you reach along the way. But when you come in, when you're in sales, there is no. You gotta be pretty good from the start. But so anyway, Jim. So, how many years in the plant, and then till you started your rep business, and what are what's the next step for your rep business?
So it was 11 years in the plant, and I started to realize that I have less of a corporate mindset and more of an entrepreneurial wanting to help people be successful. So I went out and started my own little business, and you go through different stages. I have been in Pittsburgh now for about 5 years.
Yeah.
But when I moved here, I started my business up in Elmira, New York, and then I ended up having an office in Corning for a long time. And I was going through some paperwork to move, and I found my very first line card. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, I would never sell that today. That's how much the technology has changed. So, you evolve, you learn it. You're always learning.
Yeah. And
in that regard, you're always a rookie.
Yeah.
Because you're always learning new stuff. And so you evolve, and then you get to the point to where, all right, I know I'm a good salesperson. I can hold my own, then you start looking at, well, what's my real purpose in life?
Mm-hmm.
So my real purpose in life is to help other people be successful. I've been blessed. I have great mentors. I've lived long enough to learn a lot of lessons, see a lot of changes, and I've lived long enough to see this reshoring come back to where manufacturing start to come back, because I was wondering whether I was going to live long enough.
Yeah.
I've heard it for 25 years.
Right.
I've heard that word, but I was wondering whether it was going to come back or not. Now it's starting to come back. So if I can help somebody be successful through my experience, then it's beyond closing an order now.
Yeah.
It's just gotten there,
And so since we are having this talk in my personal motorsports museum and Hall of Fame, so right behind you, it's Rick Mears and the 79, 84, 88, 91 cars in which he won the Indianapolis 500. So you brought something up that I really try to live by, this goals. So I have a plan for every day, and I have short-term plans, but no goals, because the Rick Mears philosophy is you do the best job at what it is that you're doing, and that leads you to the next opportunity.
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
To the next. And like he gave the example, when I was a little kid and I started racing mini bikes in the desert in Bakersfield, California, there wasn't a goal to win Indianapolis 4 times. I was the best. I did the best I could at racing mini bikes in the desert. Then it was dune buggies, then on and so forth. And he kept a big network of people, and just was always did the best he could at the thing that he was doing. That's what I love, is to, because even like in my business, There are things that are major focuses for us that were not on my radar 5 years ago, but are now.
Mhm.
So,
Sure.
yeah. So it's just things just keep constantly evolving and moving forward.
Well, we are in a museum. I don't know if everybody can see just the history around here. And I know you and I share an admiration for DeLorean.
Yeah.
Just his career. And you've got a wealth of knowledge. Every time I bring something up about the automotive racing, I learned something new. Just like we were out in the shop with the Cosworth Vega.
Yeah.
I knew a little bit about it.
Yeah.
But you really brought up things that I didn't know. So I think that's great. And I think that's a great industry. So if you look at automotive history from an entrepreneurial perspective, there is a lot to be learned.
Oh, yeah. 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 And even in one of John DeLorean's books, the people, the Durants who were formed General Motors, he said they would not like the way this, it's the death by committee kind of stuff and all that.
Yeah. And there's, you can actually see it. And I think delving into it a little bit more, it's that old joke about, what's a camel?
Yeah.
A camel is a horse designed by a committee.
Yeah, right.
And a real life example of that is the Edsel, the Ford Edsel.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody had to throw something on that.
Yep, that's right.
And the car just had some cool stuff on it. It just didn't work.
Yeah.
Because it was just a bunch of stuff thrown together on a chassis.
That's right. Yeah.
So I love automobile history because there's so much to be learned.
There's a lot to read, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of, we'll say, industrial business books. The way there's a lot of automotive business books to read. They're very interesting. Yeah. There's a lot of industrial history, and it just names dates and places. And the automotive kind of applies to what we do from a philosophical standpoint, that, from ideas on a drawing board to production line, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, there's not really that. So coming back to where you are now, Jim. So do you have any type of formal program? So, because what I'd like to do, get people hooked up with you. So, when working with to help others succeed, so are you, what does that look like? Or you help people who want to launch their own rep business, or people who are working for others? Anything formal? Just kind of talk about that a little bit.
Someone that wants to start a business, or somebody that's in a startup mode, or somebody that wants an exit a business. Because one of the things I've learned, and I learned this later on, trying to get out of my own business, once I bought a business, flipped it around, tuned it up a little bit, made it successful. Now I want to get out of it.
Yeah.
It's just as hard to get out of it.
Yeah.
For me, it was just as hard to get out of it as it was to get into it. So that it's that whole journey that I have the experience to share. And a lot of people will call me up and say, hey, I got a business plan. I'd like you to look it over. And, I'll look it over and I'll say, look, and they'll say, and it amazes me how eager people are to get into, I'm going to dip into my 401k. I'm going to sell my house. I'm going to throw all this into there. And I'm thinking, well, you might want to rethink that, because there's some fundamental things, some elements that you have to take care of in every business. And you haven't checked off any. You don't have 1 out of 5.
Yeah.
So my advice is to really stay away. And I always tell people, I'm not going to let you get into your 401k. I'm not going to let you remortgage your house, because if it's a good business plan, it's going to fly on its own.
Yeah, that's right.
And if it doesn't fly, you got to have a roof over your head.
Yeah.
So, it's that kind of knowledge that I can bring. So.
Well, that's great. So why don't we wrap it up here, Jim? So where can folks find you?
Well, I'm all over LinkedIn.
Okay.
So it's James Michael Cendoma.
Okay.
And you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find a whole bunch of videos on YouTube. And on Facebook, but Facebook is more of family.
Sure.
I just keep track of what all my cousins, and,
Right.
families doing on that. But mainly LinkedIn. So, and that's it. Reach out to me. I'm more than willing to help out.
All right. All right. Good deal. Good
Same
seeing
here.
you, my
Thank
friend.
you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Let's go work out.
Yeah. All right on.